On my stepson's 18th birthday, he handed me a custom Titleist driver worth $800 and said, "Happy early Father's Day, Brad." My wife held up her iPhone recording, and somebody at our table laughed. I just smiled, saw the divorce papers taped to the club shaft, signed them right there at Seasons 52, and walked out into the Scottsdale heat. The air conditioning hummed softly above our heads. The smell of grilled salmon and truffle mac drifted from the open kitchen. Stephanie sat across from me in her athleisure outfit. Perfect yoga studio manager smile, one manicured hand on her kombucha, and the other holding her phone at just the right angle to catch my reaction. She'd been building her Instagram following all year, posting motivational quotes and smoothie bowls between client sessions. To her left sat Dylan, 18 candles worth of attitude and Axe body spray, scrolling through TikTok while the server brought out his dessert. The chocolate cake had Dylan 18 written in gold icing. He took a couple bites, set his fork down, then reached under the table with that practiced half smile he'd been working on all week. "Here," he said, sliding the golf club across the marble tabletop. "Got you something early for Father's Day." The Titleist driver gleamed under the restaurant's ambient lighting, custom fitted with my exact specs. Wrapped around the shaft was a manila envelope secured with clear packing tape. My name, Brad Lawson, was written across the front in Stephanie's precise handwriting. I didn't touch it right away. I just stared at Dylan. This kid I'd taught to hit a curveball and negotiate his first car deal was leaning back in his chair like he was handing me a business card, not gutting me in front of half the country club crowd. Stephanie nudged things along. "Come on, Brad," she said, angling her phone so it caught my face and the envelope in the same frame. "Don't be weird. Open your present from all of us." Somebody at the next table turned to look, a nervous laugh from somewhere behind me. The whole restaurant seemed to lean in, like even strangers could sense something wasn't right. I picked up the driver. My fingers traced the custom grip. I could feel the weight of it, perfectly balanced, exactly what I'd been looking at online for months. My heart didn't race. It felt like a chunk of desert ice had settled behind my ribs. Inside the envelope were divorce papers, not a Father's Day card, not a joke. Real papers, already filled out. My name typed neatly under Respondent. There was a post-it note on top in Stephanie's handwriting. "All you have to do is sign. We already talked to Austin about it." Austin, her 26-year-old personal trainer from the fitness club. The guy she'd been helping with his nutrition certification for the past 8 months. I looked up at her. She smiled like we were all in on the same joke, phone still recording. "Easier this way," she said. "You don't like conflict, remember? This keeps it clean." Dylan cleared his throat and finally met my eyes. "It's time for a change, Brad," he said. "Mom says you've been holding us back." He sounded like he was reading from a script somebody else had written. I could see Stephanie's thumb hovering over the screen, ready to post this to her stories the moment I lost it. I didn't yell, I didn't snap the driver, I didn't flip the table like some reality TV meltdown. I thought about all the overtime I'd put in, building my commercial real estate portfolio. All the weekends I'd spent at Dylan's travel baseball tournaments instead of networking events. All the times I'd covered Stephanie's yoga retreat expenses while she was probably sneaking off with Austin. And then I did the one thing nobody at that table expected. I smiled. "All right," I said. My voice sounded calm, almost bored. "If that's what you want." I pulled the Mont Blanc pen from my jacket pocket, the one Dylan had given me last Christmas. Stephanie lifted her phone higher, the screen reflecting in her designer sunglasses pushed up on her head. I flipped through the pages, saw the dates, the neat check marks that had already decided who got what. Our 3,000 square foot desert home with the pool and mountain views. My investment portfolio worth $220,000. The rental properties I'd been building for Dylan's college fund. I signed where the little yellow flags told me to sign. When I was done, I tucked the pen back into my pocket, slid the papers back into the envelope, and gently taped it back to the golf club. "Happy birthday, kid," I said to Dylan. "Hope this works out better for you than it did for me." I stood up. My chair scraped against the polished concrete floor. Nobody said a word. The server froze halfway to our table with another round of drinks. The smell of seared duck and expensive wine pressed in around me as I walked past the bar, past the couples who suddenly found their phones fascinating. Stephanie called after me, voice half laugh, half nervous. "Brad, don't be dramatic," she said. We're just making it official." I didn't answer. I pushed open the glass door and stepped out into the Arizona evening. The heat hit me first, that dry desert heat that sucks the moisture right out of your lungs. The parking lot shimmered under the LED streetlights, perfectly maintained like everything else in North Scottsdale. My truck sat where I'd left it, a silver F-250 with custom rims and a barely there scratch on the rear bumper from hauling equipment to job sites. I climbed in, shut the door, and just sat there with my hands on the leather steering wheel, staring through the windshield at the Camelback Mountains silhouetted against the sunset. That's when the shaky part hit me. Not back in the restaurant under Stephanie's camera. Not when I saw the papers. Sitting in that truck alone, I felt my hands start to tremble. My breath came out in short bursts. 45 years old, former college baseball player, 15 years building a commercial real estate empire, and I just let a woman hand me divorce papers taped to a golf club without putting up a fight. You probably expect me to say I was furious. And for a second, sure, something hot flared up in my chest. But it fizzled out quick, swallowed by something colder and more calculating. I wasn't mad. I was focused. I started the engine. Instead of pulling out, I grabbed my phone and opened my contacts. Scrolled down to Jerry Martinez, my attorney buddy from the country club. He picked up on the second ring. "Brad, what's up, man? You sound weird." "It happened," I said. "They did it tonight at Dylan's birthday dinner." He went quiet for a second. "Jesus, Brad. The golf club thing?" "Yep. Seasons 52, full audience, iPhone recording the whole show." "Where are you now?" Through the windshield, I watched Stephanie come out of the restaurant, phone still glued to her ear, Dylan trailing behind her. She looked around like she expected to see me standing there waiting for them. When she spotted the truck still in the lot, she shrugged and went back to her conversation, probably uploading the video to her Instagram story. "Parking lot," I said, watching her celebrate. "You want me to come down there?" "Nah, I'm good. But, Jerry, remember what we talked about? About the digital forensics guy?" "Yeah, Marcus Rivera, the computer guy. You sure you want to go that route?" "They think they blindsided me," I said, watching Stephanie laugh at something on her screen. "Like, I haven't been paying attention for months." "Have you been paying attention?" I let out a long breath. "I stopped being blind about 6 months ago. Just hadn't decided what to do about it yet." "Brad," Jerry said carefully, "don't do anything stupid tonight. Come by the office tomorrow. We'll map this out properly." "Already mapped," I said. "I just need you to execute." We hung up. I set the phone back on the console and finally shifted into reverse. As I backed out, I caught one last glimpse of Stephanie in the rearview mirror, face lit up by her screen, probably already posting about her liberation journey or some wellness guru bullshit. They thought this was the beginning of my exit, the part where I walked away and left them to the life they'd been building behind my back. What they didn't know was that some exits are really entrances. I pulled out onto Frank Lloyd Wright Boulevard and headed away from the restaurant lights, already thinking about the bank statements I'd been saving, the emails I'd forwarded to myself, and the one thing I still had that they hadn't taken from me yet: my business network. I didn't drive home that night. Instead, I let the truck roll past my exit, past the gated community entrance, past the rows of million-dollar desert homes where people were settling in for the evening. Es mit dol. Mind wasn't on the road. It was drifting backward months, maybe 8, trying to pinpoint when things had started to rot. Truth was, the cracks had been showing long before the birthday stunt. I'd just been patching over them with hope and expensive dinners, like a man fixing a foundation crack with spackling instead of calling a structural engineer. It started with Stephanie's sudden fitness obsession. She'd come home from client sessions, smelling like expensive cologne instead of yoga mat cleaner. Her excuses were always Instagram ready. Brad, Austin was helping me develop new workshop content, or we lost track of time planning the retreat program. But I'd been around long enough to know when a woman is coming home from work and when she's coming home from something else. Especially when the work sessions started happening at 10 p.m. on weeknights. The changes were subtle at first. New workout clothes that cost more than my monthly truck payment. Supplements and protein powders that filled our kitchen counter like a GNC store exploded. Personal training sessions that somehow required weekend trips to Sedona for intensive workshops that never seemed to have any other participants. Then Dylan started pulling away. Kid used to follow me everywhere. golf lessons, job sites, car shopping trips. But as he got closer to 18, something shifted. Conversations shrank down to grunts. He kept his bedroom door closed. If I asked about school or baseball, he'd look at me like I was interrupting something more important. And it wasn't normal teenage stuff. It was sharper, more purposeful, like somebody had been coaching him. I'd catch him on video calls, voice dropping to whispers when I walked past his room. He'd close his laptop if I came into the kitchen while he was using it. One evening, as I sat in the living room going through property listings on my laptop, he walked past and muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "Mom says you're just here for the tax benefits." He said it like he didn't even realize he'd spoken out loud. I closed the laptop. "What was that?" He froze, blinked, then shook his head. "Nothing, forget it." But I didn't forget. Not that, not the sudden coldness, not the way he'd tense up when I walked into a room, not the way he'd look at his mom like she was the only person in the world telling him the truth. The night things shifted for real, I was sitting at the Phoenician Resort bar after a client dinner, nursing a $15 bourbon when Jerry slid onto the stool next to me. Jerry's the kind of guy built like an old linebacker, thick-shouldered and still intimidating despite the expensive suits. He hung up his cleats 20 years ago, but the way he reads people never changed. "You look like a man chewing glass," he said. "Client problems?" "Personal stuff," I answered. He snorted. "Nobody looks that miserable unless a woman's involved." I laughed, but it came out thin. Jerry leaned in. "All right, talk to me straight. What's going on?" I told him about the late-night training sessions, the coldness from Dylan, the way money seemed to evaporate from our joint accounts like water through a cracked pipe, the protein powder bills that rivaled our grocery budget, the business expenses for Stephanie's yoga studio that never seemed to generate actual revenue. Jerry didn't interrupt, didn't judge. He just listened like the cop he used to be, taking mental notes, filing details away for later analysis. When I finished, he tapped the bar twice with his knuckles. "You want the truth?" he asked. "Paper doesn't lie. Start keeping records, every statement, every transaction. Email it all to yourself from your business account. Turn every receipt into evidence." He said it calmly, like a doctor explaining a simple treatment plan. I stared into my bourbon and felt something shift, like I'd been handed a GPS in a foggy desert. So I did what he said. I checked our joint accounts. I printed statements from the last 8 months. I circled withdrawals I didn't recognize. Austin's gym membership fees, premium fitness certifications, weekend trips to Sedona that Stephanie said were solo spiritual retreats. I emailed it all to myself using my business Gmail. Then, 3 weeks ago, I hired Marcus Rivera, the digital forensic specialist Jerry recommended. It felt wrong, like violating the last piece of trust in our marriage. But deep down, I already knew Stephanie had crossed the line. I just needed proof so she couldn't gaslight me later. Marcus met me at a coffee shop in Old Town Scottsdale, handed me a flash drive and said, "You might want to look at this somewhere private." The first photo showed Stephanie and Austin outside the fitness factory, her gym. She was laughing, head thrown back, hand on his chest, like they were posing for a fitness magazine cover. He had his arm around her waist, both of them looking like an ad for overpriced protein shakes. The second photo caught them kissing beside her white BMW in the gym parking lot, framed by the artificial glow of the LED security lights. My fingers tightened around the flash drive until the plastic creaked. I expected jealousy to hit me like a freight train, fire, rage, maybe even grief. But what washed over me instead was heavier, more methodical. I felt stupid, but also clear, like fog lifting off a mountain. 20 years of building something real, and this is what I got. A fitness influencer wife and her boy toy trainer treating my life like content for their social media feeds. Marcus cleared his throat. There's more. Inside the digital folder was a breakdown of transfers, Venmo payments, credit card transactions. Little bits here and there that didn't look suspicious individually, but together told a clear story. Austin's rent, his truck payment, his certification courses, even a weekend trip to Vegas I thought she'd taken with her sister. $28,000. Money I'd saved for Dylan's future, for property investments, for us. Money that had been systematically drained over 8 months to fund her affair. I drove home that night with the flash drive sitting on my passenger seat like a loaded gun. Stephanie was in the kitchen when I walked in. stretching in designer leggings, glowing like she hadn't been financing another man's lifestyle with my money. "Hey babe," she said, "you look stressed. Rough day at the office?" For a moment, I almost confronted her, almost slammed the evidence onto the granite countertop, almost shouted like a man in a bad movie. But something in me stopped. A small voice whispered, "Not yet. You're not ready." The next morning, I almost convinced myself to forgive her, told myself marriages go through rough patches, that maybe she'd made a mistake, that maybe I wasn't blameless either. I told myself all the things a desperate man tells himself when he's not ready to blow up the life he built. But that illusion shattered when I saw Austin driving Dylan's car, the Honda Accord I'd bought for his 16th birthday, the one we'd spent 3 weekends shopping for together. Dylan was in the passenger seat, both of them laughing at something on Austin's phone, driving right past me in the Whole Foods parking lot like I was invisible. They didn't wave, didn't slow down, didn't think twice. It felt like someone reached into my chest and squeezed. That's when the truth hit me like a sledgehammer. They weren't just replacing me, they were using everything I'd paid for to push me out of the picture, the car I'd saved for, the insurance I paid, the phone plan that let them coordinate behind my back. I stood there in that parking lot, holding a bag of groceries I suddenly couldn't feel, watching the taillights disappear around the corner. And I realized something that changed everything. If they wanted me gone so badly, I could give them exactly what they asked for, just not the way they expected. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered everything. Bank records going back 18 months. Credit card statements showing charges at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel receipts from business trips that had no corresponding client meetings. Phone records showing hundreds of texts between Stephanie and Austin, often in the middle of the night when she claimed to be asleep next to me. I photographed everything, scanned everything, backed everything up in 3 different cloud storage accounts. Jerry had taught me to think like a prosecutor. Assume your opponent will lie, destroy evidence, and claim ignorance. Be ready for all of it. The beauty of having a cheating wife who thinks she's smarter than you is that she gets careless. Stephanie started leaving her phone unlocked around the house. She'd take calls from Austin while I was in the next room, thinking the TV would cover her voice. She'd come home with new jewelry, new clothes, new confidence, and when I'd ask about it, she'd give me some story about treating herself or investing in her brand. What she didn't know was that I'd installed a security system in our house 6 months earlier, not just for break-ins, but for peace of mind while traveling for work. The cameras had motion sensors and audio recording capabilities. They were supposed to protect our home from intruders. Instead, they captured something much more valuable, evidence of who the real intruder was. The recording from a Tuesday afternoon in March showed Stephanie and Austin on our living room couch, making plans for their future. In my house, on furniture I'd paid for, talking about how much easier things would be once Brad is out of the picture. Austin's voice was clear on the recording. "Just make sure Dylan stays on our side. The kid's the key to everything." Stephanie laughed, that same laugh I'd fallen in love with 12 years ago, now turned into a weapon. "Dylan hates him already. He thinks Brad's pathetic. This'll be easy." I sat in my home office that night, listening to my wife and her lover plan my destruction in my own living room, and something inside me finally snapped into perfect clarity. They wanted easy? I'd show them easy. The morning after the birthday ambush, I woke up in my truck outside a 24-hour diner in Tempe, neck stiff from sleeping against the window. My phone was buzzing with text from Stephanie. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. You knew this was coming. Austin thinks you're being dramatic." I deleted them all and drove straight to Jerry's office. His firm occupied the top floor of a glass tower in central Phoenix, the kind of place that charged by the view. When I walked into his corner office, he was already waiting with coffee and a legal pad covered in notes. "Show me what you got," he said. I handed him the flash drive and bank statements. He plugged it into his laptop, looked at the photos, the transaction records, the digital trail Marcus had compiled. He took off his reading glasses, wiped them with his tie, and put them back on like he needed a clearer view. "Well," he said finally, "this is substantial." "I don't want a war," I replied. "I just want what's mine." He nodded. "Fair is a flexible concept in divorce court, but fraud and theft aren't." "Fraud?" He turned his laptop screen toward me, showing a credit application with my forged signature, Your wife tried to open a joint business account using your SSN and income information. That's identity theft. And this, he clicked to another document, is a lease application for a condo in Austin's name, but using your credit and income as guarantor. My stomach flipped. Austin was in on it? Up to his protein shake-loving neck, Jerry said, and depending on how much Dylan knew, he might have unknowingly participated in fraud. Dylan, I whispered. He wouldn't... But even as I said it, I knew there was no solid ground under that hope anymore. The kid who used to beg me to throw batting practice until my arm was sore had been turned against me systematically, methodically. Jerry folded his hands. We'll gather more evidence, but understand this. You're in a much stronger position than they probably expect. I leaned back in the leather chair, feeling the truth settle around me like armor. So what now? We build a bulletproof case, quietly, methodically. No emotional outbursts, no confrontations. Let the evidence do the talking. He paused. And Brad, if you want to protect Dylan from serious legal consequences, we can probably do that. But you need to be clear about what you want. I swallowed hard, thinking about that kid who used to fall asleep in the truck on the way home from baseball games. I don't want to ruin him. I just want the truth. All of it. Jerry nodded. Then that's what we'll do. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. I went to work every day, smiled at clients, closed deals, acted like my world wasn't imploding, but every spare moment was spent with Jerry and Marcus, building our case like military strategists planning an invasion. We subpoenaed phone records. We traced financial transactions. We documented every lie, every deception, every dollar stolen. Marcus recovered deleted text messages that would make a sailor blush. Stephanie and Austin planning their future together, discussing my inevitable breakdown, laughing about how easy it would be to manage the transition. The hardest part was listening to the recordings from my own house. Hours of conversation between my wife and her lover, sometimes with Dylan joining in, all of them discussing me like I was a business problem to be solved rather than a human being to be respected. In one recording, Dylan's voice was crystal clear. When do I get to stop pretending? I'm tired of acting like I care about his stupid stories. Austin's response cut even deeper. Just a little longer, man. Once we get him to sign, you never have to see him again if you don't want to. That night, I sat in my office until 3 a.m., staring at a photo from Dylan's Little League days. He'd just hit his first home run, and the look on his face was pure joy. He'd run around the bases like his feet weren't touching the ground, then jumped into my arms at home plate like I'd hung the moon. Now he was part of a conspiracy to destroy me. But somewhere in that pain, I found something harder and more focused than anger. I found purpose. This wasn't just about Stephanie anymore. This was about justice, about truth, about making sure that actions have consequences, even when those actions come wrapped in birthday cake and Instagram stories. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting my tie for the last time in the house, I'd thought. I'd grow old in. I looked at my reflection and saw something I hadn't seen in months. A man who knew his worth. I'd lost weight over the past 3 weeks, partly from stress, partly from clarity. When you stop carrying other people's lies, you discover how heavy they were. My eyes were clearer than they'd been in years. My shoulders were straighter. I looked like a man who'd stopped apologizing for taking up space in his own life. Outside, the Phoenix morning was crisp and clear, one of those perfect desert days that reminded you why people moved here in the first place. I climbed into my truck one last time as the owner of 1247 Saguaro Vista Drive and drove toward downtown with the windows down, breathing air that tasted like freedom. Jerry met me in the courthouse parking lot, carrying a briefcase that contained enough evidence to sink a battleship. "You ready for this?" he asked. I looked up at the building where my marriage would officially end, where justice would finally have its day, where the truth would replace the lies. "I've been ready for months," I said. "I just didn't know it yet." As we walked up the courthouse steps together, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't an ending, it was a reckoning, and I was finally ready to collect what I was owed. 3 weeks later, I was standing on the courthouse steps in downtown Phoenix, watching Stephanie and Austin walk through the metal detectors like they were heading to a business meeting instead of their financial execution. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, all wood paneling and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly sick. Stephanie sat at the petitioner's table in a designer blazer that probably cost more than most people's rent, hair perfect, makeup camera ready. Austin sat behind her in a suit that still had creases from the store tags. Dylan sat 2 rows back, looking smaller than I'd seen him in years. He kept glancing at me like he wanted to say something, then looking away. For the first time in months, I saw uncertainty in his eyes, instead of that practiced contempt Stephanie had been coaching into him. When the judge called things to order, Stephanie's attorney stood up first. Some slick guy from Old Town with a spray tan and too much confidence. "Your Honor," he began, "we'd like to present video evidence showing Mr. Lawson's voluntary agreement to these divorce terms." Voluntary. Jerry didn't even blink. He just adjusted his cufflinks and waited. The attorney clicked his remote, and there it was on the courtroom monitor, the birthday dinner, the golf club, me signing those papers while Stephanie filmed the whole thing like she was documenting a gender reveal party. I sat perfectly still, watching myself go through the motions, watching the flicker of shock cross my face, watching Stephanie's satisfied smirk behind her iPhone camera. The whole room could see the calculated cruelty of it, the public humiliation, designed for social media consumption. When the video ended, the attorney turned to the judge with a shit-eating grin. As you can see, Mr. Lawson willingly accepted the terms. No duress, no coercion. Jerry stood up slowly, like a man who'd been waiting all day for this moment. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "may we replay that clip? I'd like to draw attention to a few details." The judge nodded. Jerry stepped closer to the monitor as the video rolled again. "Here," he said, pausing on Stephanie's face as she held up the phone. "Note that Mrs. Lawson chose to announce divorce proceedings in a public restaurant during her son's birthday celebration. Observe the angle." Another click. Mrs. Lawson was not documenting a mutual decision. She was filming her husband's humiliation for social media content. The courtroom was dead silent except for the soft clicking of Jerry's remote. "And here," he continued, stopping at the moment Dylan slid the golf club across the table, "we see a minor being used to deliver legal documents as part of what can only be described as an elaborate public humiliation ritual." He let that image hang there. A half-eaten birthday cake, a manila envelope, a stepfather being carved out of his family for entertainment. Jerry stepped back from the monitor. "This isn't evidence of mutual agreement, Your Honor. This is evidence of calculated emotional abuse designed for social media consumption." Stephanie's attorney shifted uncomfortably. The judge looked at Stephanie over her reading glasses. "Mrs. Lawson, is this characterization accurate?" Stephanie cleared her throat. "It was just, we were trying to keep things light, make it less awkward." Jerry lifted his briefcase onto the table like he was unloading artillery. "Now, let's examine the financial evidence." He handed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in controlled demolition. Bank statements showing the $28,000 in unauthorized transfers. Credit applications with forged signatures. The attempted real estate fraud using my business information. Each document hit the room like a small explosion. Austin started sweating through his cheap suit. Stephanie's perfect composure began to crack like expensive makeup in desert heat. But the killing blow came when Jerry played the recorded phone calls Marcus had recovered from Stephanie's cloud backup. Her voice filled the courtroom, clear as day. "Just put Brad's name on everything. He won't check until it's too late. He's too busy trying to be the perfect stepdad." Austin's voice. "What if he finds out? Then we'll already have what we need. Besides, Dylan thinks he's a joke. The kid's totally on our side." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Dylan stood up suddenly, his voice cracking when he spoke. "I didn't know about the money stuff, Your Honor. Mom told me Brad was planning to leave us. She said he was going to take everything and disappear." Stephanie whipped around. "Dylan, sit down." But he kept talking, words spilling out like water through a broken dam. "She told me to help with the paperwork, said it was just to protect us." His voice broke, and for a moment he sounded like the little boy who used to ask me to check for monsters under his bed. "She said he didn't really love us, that he was just using us for tax benefits." He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in months, tears streaming down his face. "Brad, I'm sorry. I didn't know they were stealing from you. I thought you didn't want us anymore. My throat tightened, but I stayed calm. This was his moment to choose truth over the lies he'd been fed. And he was choosing right. The judge took a long breath. "Thank you for your honesty, young man. Please be seated." Jerry closed his briefcase with the finality of a coffin lid. "Your Honor, given the evidence of financial fraud, identity theft, and emotional manipulation documented here today, we believe Mr. Lawson deserves full protection of his assets, recovery of the stolen funds, and a judgment that reflects the true nature of this dissolution." The judge nodded slowly. "I agree." Then she turned to Stephanie with the kind of look that could freeze helium. "Mrs. Lawson, you will be responsible for repaying the misappropriated funds with interest. The fraudulent credit applications will be referred to the district attorney's office. Mr. Lawson will retain the marital home, his business interests, and his retirement accounts. Given your conduct, spousal support is denied." Stephanie looked like someone had just told her that yoga wasn't a real workout. Austin stared at his hands like they held answers to questions he'd forgotten to ask. And Dylan? He was looking at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in 2 years. As we gathered our things, Jerry leaned toward me. "Well," he said quietly, "that's one hell of a birthday video she'll remember." I almost smiled. She wanted to film my humiliation. Instead, she directed her own downfall. For the first time since that night at Seasons 52, I felt something heavy lift off my chest. Not victory, not revenge. Something better. Justice. When it was all over, when the courthouse doors closed behind me and I stepped out into the Phoenix afternoon sun, I just stood there on the steps for a moment, feeling the desert heat soak into my shoulders. The sky was that perfect Arizona blue you only get in winter, clear and endless. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Dylan appeared beside me, hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking like he wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. "Brad," he said finally, Can I come home?" I looked at this kid who'd been turned against me, who'd been used as a weapon in someone else's war, who'd finally found the courage to choose truth over manipulation. He was 18 now, legally an adult, but in that moment he looked like the 10-year-old who used to help me fix sprinklers in the backyard. "Yeah," I said, "you can come home." We stood there together on those courthouse steps, two men who'd been broken by betrayal, but were still standing, still breathing, still capable of rebuilding what had been torn down. I'd spent 15 years building a life, a business, a family, and in one birthday dinner, I thought I'd lost it all. But standing there with Dylan, I realized something that changed everything. Sometimes life serves you a custom golf club with divorce papers taped to it and calls it a gift. But dignity? That's something you forge yourself, one decision at a time. And if you're listening to this, wondering if you're too old to start over, too tired to fight back, or too beaten down to stand up for yourself, let me tell you something. From a man who's been there, you're not done yet. You've still got room to rise. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay down. Sometimes the best revenge is just becoming yourself again. And that's exactly what I did.